Hello, I'm John Hemingway. Welcome back to Shropshire. Now, I have often said that for you as a sheep farmer, the late pregnancy ration in your ewes is the single most important point of intervention, and I stand by that. If you get that wrong, it has a knock-on effect on literally everything else, but that does not mean shouldn't give due consideration to the early lactation diet as well. If we've managed our nutrition during pregnancy well, we've set ourselves up for good birth weights and good udder development, and we want to follow that through by making sure that those ewes achieve the peak milk yield they're capable of. So stick with me and we will talk about feeding ewes for milk. Now, it's very easy to think that the time when ewes have the highest nutritional demand is during late pregnancy, but of course that's not true. The highest nutritional demands come during lactation. The reason that we take that late pregnancy ration so seriously is that it's a period where the energy demand of the ewe is increasing and the amount she can physically eat is decreasing. So we have to increase the energy density of that diet. When it comes to lactation, post-lambing, we've got a couple of factors that give us a little bit of leeway on the ration, even though the energy demands are going up. First is the fact that once the lambs are out, the amount that ewe can eat increases. Once the lambs are out of the animal, the rumen expands again, and actually by the time we're at 3 to 4 weeks post-lambing, that's peak milk yield for a sheep. We're seeing her eating at least 1.5 times as much dry matter as she was able to during late pregnancy. The other factor we can take into account is that we can normally afford for ewes to lose a little bit of condition and milk off their back. Now, we didn't want them losing condition when they're heavily pregnant. We want them holding that there. But we've got some scope for them to lose a bit during early lactation if they land in good condition. We can afford for them to use some body reserves to get up to peak milk yield. So how do we feed to allow them to do that? Well, if you're an early lambing flock and you're keeping your ewes housed after lambing, then actually it's really easy. You do the same thing as what you did before lambing. You know what's in your forage because of course you've had a forage analysis done. We know what's in your concentrate, and we just do the maths and work out how much extra concentrate we need to be feeding them for them to get to peak milk yield. And your vet can do that, or your nutritionist can do that, or you can do it yourself. The complication comes when we're turning ewes out, and of course this is quite applicable this year because we've had good weather early on, and quite rightly people have got ewes and lambs out early, but they've done so at a period where the grass isn't really coming through quickly yet. The difficulty when ewes and lambs are out is knowing exactly what's available to them out in the field. Fortunately, this is not actually as difficult as it sounds, and we can assess the amount of grass that is available to use in the spring in a number of ways. If you're really keen, you can use a plate meter, and you'll know what a plate meter is probably. It's a fancy stick with a disc platform on it that you put on the ground, and it measures the height of the grass. There are other ways that you can do this more simply, such as with a sward stick. This is just a fancy ruler. You can print them off the internet for free, and you put these on the ground and measure how much grass you've got. But you don't even need a sward stick because you can do these measurements with a good old-fashioned ruler. So we're going out into the fields to look at how much food there is available for your ewes in the form of grass, and we're going to measure the height of the sward. If we've got a sward below 3 centimeters in height, then we also need to be putting out supplementary forage. That is too low at that point. We want at least 4 centimeters. As the sward height increases, so does the actual dry matter intake of the ewe daily. When we get to optimum sward height, that is 6 to 9 centimeters for a sheep, that is when that ewe is using that grass to best effect and taking on as much as she possibly can each day. Now, with the measurements of your grass, you can use your vet or your nutritionist or yourself to work out how much food there is out in that field. We can also use that to measure how long we'll be able to keep those ewes on that particular bit of ground before we need to move them and let that regrow. But we've got that figure. We know the requirements of the ewe because we can look them up in this book, which I can't recommend highly enough. Then we can do the sums and we can say, okay, they've got this much food from the grass, this is how much concentrate we need to supplement them with. And we can very easily factor in those ewes losing a certain amount of condition during that first month of lactation as well. And the good news is that it gets even easier than that, because if you look in this book, you'll find that there is an excellent diagram in there, and this shows you sward height in centimeters, and it tells you plain and simple how much you ought to be supplementing each ewe based on the height of the grass. So that's it for this video. The key points that I wanted to get across are that peak energy requirement is not at its highest during late pregnancy, it's at its highest during peak lactation. I wanted to get across the fact that it is easy to measure how much food you've got out there on the field. You can do it with a ruler. Everybody has got a ruler. You might not know where it is, but I guarantee there is one somewhere in your house. With those things in mind, I hope that you'll just take an extra minute to think, my ewes have lambed, they're on their way up to peak lactation. Do they have the energy that they need to hit that peak? That's it from me. I'll be along with another video very soon, and I hope to see you there. Bye.